and welcome to Exotic Gardening UK, you watch Kris Weekly. And on this week's episode, we're doing November jobs in the exotic garden. So we say November is a main transition month in the whole year. We've gone obviously well past summer into autumn now, and it is the month where we put the garden to bed once and for all, and it's where we do the most protection. And yes, we'll go into December finishing off the protection in the garden as well for things like the tree ferns, but November is where we really put most plants to bed. We've brought in all the tender plants to the greenhouse or our conservatory or our frost-free spaces, be it a garage or a shed or something like that. The plants that stay out in the garden are very hardy, they don't need any protection, but then everything else in between that has been left out, November is a time generally where we protect them. So the Musa basjoos, the Musa sikkimensis, the tree ferns potentially, and the colocasias, the dahlias, and everything that's left in the ground, the cannas, things like that, and our sort of tenderish palms that we're leaving out as well. That is when we protect them in November, because we will get frosts in November, mostly light, but as we get to the end of the month, the days are even shorter and it gets colder. So we don't have warm days and definitely don't have warm nights anymore, and we'll get regular frost probably by the end of the month. So this is a month where we do our most protection in the garden. And it's also the month where we've got to sort of tidy up as well. We've got all the foliage of the summer bedding and all the luxurious growth we've had from bananas, which need to clear and either compost or recycle. And it's also a great time to take stock in the garden. Have a look around and see what's worked well and if plants need moving, because quite often we've planted a plant in one space, annuals for instance, and they've overwhelmed all the plants around them. So take photographs throughout the season in summer and autumn, and then look in winter and think, where can plants be moved from and to? And that goes for things like hardy perennials as well, and your palm trees potentially. If they've outgrown their space, once you've cleared away all the summer foliage of other plants, you can see the hardy backbone and think, does anything actually need moving about? So November going into December is a great time to do this before everywhere's, hopefully not, but could be covered in snow and you can't see anything. And on a nice warm-ish 6-7 degrees today, sunny day like this, you can get out in the garden and really get on with those jobs. Now, a great job to do in November is collect seeds from annuals and other plants you may want to propagate next year. And one of them we've got here is a Spanish flag. And this is still actually flowering now because we've not had frost so far this year. But it's also got lots and lots of seeds that we can collect. So obviously we don't go for the green ones, we go for the dark brown ones. So we've got one just here. And in this case, it's just a matter of collecting it and storing that in a little paper bag, and then ideally put it somewhere cool. So I'm going to collect mine and put it into paper bags and then label them and then put them in the fridge until next spring. And there's lots of other annuals and some other perennials that we can collect seeds from, and I'm going to go around the garden and show you what I'll be collecting this year. Another great plant to collect seeds from are Cannas. Now, you can't do this from the hybrids, so things like Durban, Tropicana, but you can do it from the species. You can't do it from the hybrids because they're infertile, but the species do provide really good seed which you can sow the next year. So in this case, you want to look at your plant at the end of the season, and you'll probably see two types of seed pods. You'll see the green ones like this, and they're not ready to harvest yet. What you want to look for are these papery brown ones like these here, and this one is actually split open really well, and I can see there's a good 20-30 seeds in this seed pod, which will provide potentially 20-30 plants next year just from this one. And here we've probably got about 10-15 seed pods that are ready on this one plant, and there's plenty around the garden. So if you collect all these, sow them next year, you'll have literally hundreds and hundreds of cannas which will hopefully flower in their first year. Now here I've got a Ricinus plant. It's been hit over by the wind, so it's a funny angle, and it's got seed pods on it. And obviously if you're dealing with Ricinus, we know it's very poisonous, so you should wear gloves when you're harvesting the seeds. I'm not going to quite touch it, so I've not got my gloves on at the moment, But a lot of people ask, when are Ricinus seeds ready to actually harvest? Well, if we look at this plant, obviously at the base it started flowering earlier, and at the top we've got the newer flowers and seeds. So right at the top you've got a quite insignificant sort of powdery, creamy coloured flowers. You can hardly see them, so they're not ready to pick. A bit lower down we've got some seed pods that are well developed, but they're not ready, they're not fully sized up yet, and they've not split. And then further down at the base we've got 5 really good, fat, healthy, prickly seed pods, but they're not quite ready to harvest yet. Ideally we want them to go brown or at least split open so we can see the seeds. Once they've split open we can harvest the seeds. If you do it too early, they won't germinate when you plant them next year, and they're very likely to rot off anyway because they're not developed and they've not ripened. So hold off as long as you can. It doesn't matter if you get a few light frosts, as long as the plant continues to season and grow slightly, the seeds should still ripen and split open. But there's no point picking them when they're unripe. So that's the Ricinus plant, and then again we'll store them over winter, labelled little packets in Ricinus poison on it, just to be on the safe side, and then we'll sow them next spring. Now all the seeds I've shown you so far we collect in autumn and we sow them the following year. But in this case we have a ginger, and this is ginger for STI, which is finished flowering now, and with lots of nice big fat seed pods, and some of these are ripe. So where they've split open it reveals their sort of caviar-like seeds, little glistening pearls of orange and red, and they are ready to be harvested. And what you need to do with these is not store them at all, but to sow them straight away. And you'll get a seed tray, place your fresh seeds on the surface and cover with a little bit of vermiculite or perlite and keep the surface nice and damp. Put it somewhere between 21-25 degrees, so in a heated propagator, and they will germinate within about a month or 2 months, and you've got to get them sort of growing over winter and started. If you try to dry store these, they can rot and go mouldy, or they can really be really slow to germinate in spring or not germinate at all. So these seeds, unlike all the rest of them in this video, you do really need to sow fresh in autumn. Now November is your very last chance to actually take cuttings of the very tender plants, so the Ricinus, Coleus, Plectranthus, things like that, because the frost will be getting to these plants. But if you've got a sheltered area, you might get away with a few more weeks of these tender plants out, like I've got these here underneath the Cannas and the hedge, which haven't been touched by frost yet, so I could still take cuttings from these. But the very low temperatures as we go through the month, just the daytime temperatures don't get very warm, plants will start losing the will to live, quite literally, in terms of the tender plants like this. So they'll stop growing and they're more likely to get mould and shrivel away. So take these cuttings now, because it's your last opportunity to keep them going for next year. Now November is truly the month where we really do need to start protecting half-hardy plants in the garden if you've not already done so in October. So one of the prime candidates is Musa basjoo. Now a lot of people don't protect it, because obviously if you live in the south or on the coast, inland courtyards, against a wall, probably don't need protection. Or if you're happy for it to just be cut down to the ground every year, then obviously you don't need to protect the stem. But if you want to almost guarantee that you keep the stem height over winter and then growing again the new leaves from the top of the stem next year, then you need to protect the stem for most of the UK. And November is really the month to do it, because yes, you can do it in October, and if you've got time to do it in October but not November, then obviously do it in October. But November is when we're going to get frosts, and early frosts will damage leaves but it won't kill the pseudostem, so it's not a massive rush. to get this protected early once you've had a few frosts or before the frost, but you do need to protect it obviously before snowfall or before heavy frosts where the daytime temperatures don't rise too much and the nighttime temperatures dip well below zero, so below -2. Then you want to get this protected before that ideally. And I've done videos on this. It's basically a case of cutting the foliage off at the top of the stem and then protecting the stem. And what I like to do is get a cage of sort of netting or chicken wire with some stakes around it, fill it with straw, put a bin liner over the top half, and that's all you need to do to protect it over winter. You could try using lots and lots of fleece, but you're not going to get a big thickness of fleece unless you spend lots of money going round and round and round, compared to straw, which is really, really cheap, and you can do a great big thick insulating layer around it. The other way you might want to protect these is just basically protect the bottom half, so you might lose a bit of the trunk height, but you'll keep the base and the bottom sort of 50-60 centimetres just by piling straw around it like that. So whichever way you choose to protect or not protect your Musa basjoo, November is really the main month to do that. Now Musa sikkimensis is a little more tender than Musa basjoo, so what I like to do is actually dig up the whole plant, cut back the oldest tattiest leaves and bring that into the greenhouse, or you could bring it into a garage somewhere frost free to get it through the winter. Alternatively, if you live in a bit of a milder area or you want to risk it a little bit, you can do the same protection as Musa basjoo with the straw cage around it to insulate the trunk. You don't really want to lose the trunk on these, you want to keep the trunk over winter. Thank you for watching this edition of Exotic Gardening UK. Join me next week, where I'll be doing more in the garden.